Godfather of the Lower East Side.
Yeah, Godfather of the Lower East Side. I got that title because Bourdain came here.
Okay.
Godfather of the Lower East Side documentary.
Yes.
So Bourdain used to come down here when he was a kid and do dope.
Okay.
And so he knew I had this bag called Toilet.
Mm-hmm.
And Anthony Bourdain did Parts Unknown. So the last show that he did was Lower East Side. So he contacted me and wanted to see if I could hook him up with some people. So I hooked him up with some people. And he came here and he interviewed me. And he told me one of the reasons that he really wanted to meet me is because I had this heroin bag collection.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the bags was called Toilet. And he was saying he couldn't understand how somebody could be wanting to do heroin that has such a fucking evil name. Toilet.
Or a gross name, you know.
Well, yeah, gross. I mean, who's going to stick toilet up their nose?
Yeah.
You know, licking the toilet bowl. So he's riding uptown in a cab. And this is an old New York cab. So you could sit lots of people in it. You remember the old yellow cabs?
I mean, that's before my time, but I'm familiar, yeah.
Yeah, because they had a back seat that was huge.
Yeah.
You know, you could sit side by side,
Sure.
facing each other and whatever. Anyway, he's riding uptown with 5 people, including himself.
Mm-hmm.
And he remembered this statistic that said 4 to 5 people that do heroin are going to die. And he looked around and said, hey, there's 5 of us here. I don't want to be one of those guys. Mm-hmm. So he quit. And so that's how he came to me. And it was through the heroin bag called Toilet, which I believe was 3rd and C.
And he was just interested in how you had documented that. You're probably the only person that's documented the culture in that way.
Well, I think other people have collections. There's one from the Bronx. Lower East Side is very different. Lower East Side was probably the largest commercial drug selling area in the world. I mean, this area was huge. Mm-hmm. And it was plentiful everywhere. Outside here, I had 24 hours a day, people selling drugs.
Those are what years?
All the 80s for sure.
Okay.
And certainly 70s, but 80s when I was here. This was all 24-hour drugs. And then when you look at the geography, you got Wall Street, mm-hmm. Tribeca, Soho, Chinatown, Greenwich Village, Stuyvesant Town. So you got a mass of people where there's a huge amount of money. Mm-hmm. You know, let's say start thinking about cocaine, Wall Street. You know, Lower East Side was active in the heroin, obviously. And so, and then you consider distribution. So what do we buy? Mm-hmm. Little Italy and Chinatown. Who are the big distributors? Chinese, Italians, right?
Those are the big heroin distributors.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're surrounded also by the big heroin distributors. Mm-hmm. But nothing is known of this history. You know, if you go to Harlem, let's say, and you look up Nicky Barnes, right. You know, Mr. Untouchable, his whole organization is laid out from top to bottom, who everybody was. Mm-hmm. Everything down here is 100% secret.
Why do you think that is? You have a theory about that?
Part of it's old school gangsters thinking that, you know, you can't talk, you can't tell.
Sure.
Whereas you see with the Italians and that, they went through that once you get to Gotti, then it becomes public and everybody knows who everybody is. And then there became this whole expose on the mafia.
Was anybody ever suspicious of you as being like a documenter at the time? Did you ever receive any like pushback, people saying like, why are you interested in documenting this?
Oh, yeah, always.
And how did you handle that? Did you?
All depended on the situation.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I was in a very unusual situation. Between Houston and Delancey, this area here is the forgotten part of the Lower East Side. Mm-hmm. This area here was exactly the same as Avenue D and like that. You had Alphabet City over there where they talk about, you know, cocaine, dope, you know, all the different avenues represented different names. First night we were here, somebody got shot across the street.
First night you moved in?
Moved in. Oh, 1983. And so this was like the Wild West. And, you know, over the years, I've done a lot of, you know, drug busts, people have been shot in the street, stabbed, whatever. But what happened is that, you know, I have this storefront. So I used to take pictures and put them in the window. So all of a sudden, I come to the door one day, and there's these kids out there, mm-hmm. little kids. And I looked at these kids, and I thought, fuck, the little rascals. They looked exactly like the kids that I grew up with, mm-hmm. except I grew up in an all-white community. I'm from Western Canada.
Right.
And these were, you know, mostly Hispanic, with a few blacks thrown in. Mm-hmm. So I knew exactly who they were because it was the same kind of people that I grew up with.
Sure.
Just different culture. So then I started the Front Door book. And if you follow the Front Door book, it's a real history of the Lower East Side.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could follow, I photographed, see, there's an elementary school across the street. So some of, like I have pictures like of Bert Cruz and his father. They'd come and pick up the kids. They'd come over here, take a picture in front of the door. Mm-hmm. So this is Bert at like 6 years old. Well, I've got him now. He's in his 40s.
Right.
And so a lot of these kids grew up and they became main players. This is like John Gotti's Neighborhood.
Right.
So a lot of these guys grew up and became gangsters, and
so
they had Latin Kings.
Yeah, so you developed trust essentially because you'd known them since they were kids.
I knew them since they were kids.
Right. And how did they understand you to be? Were people sympathetic to your endeavor as to like documenting the culture and everything? Or were they like...
A lot of people... I mean, I never had a problem with it. I had more problem with cool people. Cool people are the hardest.
Right. Like, I know you're not too much into the Soho art scene, for example. Like, I watched an old documentary about that. Did you just find that, poor people or working class people are easier for you to communicate
Easier for
with?
Me.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, easier for who I am.
Right.
Once you get into Soho, then you're into competition. What university did you go to? Where do you drink? Where do you get your sneakers? Oh, we're going to meet at the Odeon. I wasn't into all that shit.
Yeah.
So for me, it was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And, you got to remember, I'm a one-man band.
Well, how about living with your wife here? Did you ever feel unsafe while you were here? Being an outsider, being from Canada, or being that the population wasn't predominantly white around here, did you ever feel any type of danger that...
Well, there's different time periods. Okay. One thing that gave me a lot of credibility was the Tompkins Square Park police riot and not giving up the tape.
Right, yeah.
And going to jail for that tape.
You were known around here for going through that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of those guys said, hey, you're not giving up that stuff. That's good for you.
Right.
You're willing to go to jail for that? Fine. So that gave me cred.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing you got to remember is on a certain level, there's not secrets around this place.
Right.
See, take a look around this room. I mean, what do you see? You see a door, no buzz-in system.
Right.
A window.
Yeah.
And me. And I'm a character who can be recognized.
Yeah, definitely.
So all of a sudden, you got this guy who lives with him and his wife and his little tiny dog. And for a while, we had roommates here on the first floor. But essentially, we could be really, really vulnerable. Mm-hmm. I'd go out sometimes at 4 a.m. because these kids would be knocking on the door because they want to have their picture taken.
Okay.
Go out and take pictures in front of the door.
You'd oblige them at 4 a.m.?
Yeah.
Cool.
If I was up and around and whatever.
Yeah.
Like there's a Front Door book. If you look up Front Door book, it's the picture just as you open up is a bunch of kids looking in the window, and I popped off a flash. So this is like 4 a.m, and these guys are looking in the window, Mira. And all of a sudden, boom, the flash goes off. And they turn around, what the fuck,
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, it's like a joke.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there was a real sort of depth of understanding between us. And some of these posses were real. Like down here, you had the Rainbow Posse.
Okay.
I'll tell you one thing about these little Puerto Rican kids. You get 10 of them, they could take down an elephant.
Uh-huh. I believe that.
I mean, I've seen some of them go around the school just sort of on the window ledge. I mean, they're just really adept at climbing, mm-hmm. Fighting, that kind of thing. And it was just part of the street life, is fighting on the street and stuff. And then, of course, as you get into the older guys, they're a lot more dangerous.
So when did it click to you that what you had in cataloging all of these photographs was like a thorough documentation of the neighborhood? Like when did you realize?
Well, I always understood it, but the society doesn't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
People call me a legacy. All right, I'll buy that. Famous photographer. Okay, I'll buy that. Who's stealing my work? Nobody. Who knows my photography? Really nobody. It's just a myth. So my goal now is to get my stuff understood. But you bring up an interesting point, that I ever feel threatened. And, a couple of times. One time I had a guy over here, he's sort of from Allen Street. He was from Ecuador. Him and his brother, Bolo. Tough guy, like a really tough fucking guy.
Yeah. And
the one thing about over there on Eldridge, they used to smoke a lot of dust. So when they would get dust, they would get bugged out.
Yeah.
So he came, and a lot, obviously they're Hispanic, a lot of them are Catholic. So he got out of jail and he came over here and he's banging on my door. And I go out. Now I know I can't invite him in. So I got to go outside. So the first thing is I got to slip out the door. Hey, yo, what's up? Okay, come stand over here. So he starts ranting. I can tell he's pretty twisted. He starts ranting about this satanic thing. So, okay, I got a bug out here. So I move over to the parking meter. And then I start to talk to him. Now, with the parking meter, we can shift around. I have something between me and him. Mm-hmm. Now, these guys were fighters. I think they called him Bolo because he used those Bolo balls or something, So I knew he was dangerous, but I had to deal with it. So I'm not going to roll on him. That's not going to work. So we just start talking and whatever. And we just keep on walking around the parking meter. Mm-hmm. Sounds crazy, but think about it.
No, I mean, I got you.
So it's kind of chest high. You're just kind of moving around like this.
Yeah.
So that's, so then I calmed him down because he was freaked about the pictures and the soul, all that crap. Mm-hmm. So I calm him down. I bring him inside. I get him to sign my book, which he does, which I'm happy about. I got Bolo in there, one of my old books. And I take his picture in front of the door.
Even after he was ranting about how he didn't.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I calmed him right down.
Yeah.
And then another time is the Satan Sinners were also part of the Tompkins Square homeless situation. That was the tent city. Mm-hmm. There was a direct action. This was all about gentrification. So there was a direct action to bring as many homeless people to Tompkins Square Park as was possible. Because when Koch came into power, the garment industry was number one.
The what industry?
The garment.
Okay, gotcha.
Clothing. You used to go to Midtown and you had all these guys running around with racks between building and moving clothes in Midtown. It was a fashion district.
Yeah.
Really active and alive. Number one economy in New York City. By the time he left 3 terms later, he was gone. And then eventually all these black people and Hispanic people and other people end up on the street as homeless. Well, of course, they're shiftless. But that's not true. What Koch did was he starts emptying out the SROs.
What's that?
Single room residency.
Okay.
Like New York City, when you go back and you read novels and things, when you read about writers going to Paris, they lived in hotels. Mm-hmm. Little dumpy hotels where you could afford to live.
Yeah, like Hemingway or something like that.
Like Hemingway, who did Tropic of Cancer? Roger Miller?
Yeah.
Henry Miller.
Henry Miller, you got it.
So you have that lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And then you have the lifestyle of guys in there working, and then the hotel flashing on the outside as the guy in his room. All of that stuff kind of ends in the 60s. And when Koch starts emptying out all the SROs and single room residency hotels, a lot of people who could live a minimal life could survive in those places. Mm-hmm. So they emptied out thousands of people onto the street. It wasn't that they were shiftless, non-working people. It's just that they were minimal living people. New York used to have a whole underground economy. Like Jim Power, the guy that was just here, he lived in furnace rooms.
Wow.
Furnace room is warm in the winter.
Yeah.
It's a big cement space that has to be cleaned because, the oil and whatever. And he's lived in those places. Mm-hmm. You had supers down here that lived in basements. They started to eliminate. It's kind of like the pushing out of the poor of New York City and starting off in the lowest common level. Mm-hmm. And that's the single room residencies, hotels now, because you got no resistance.
Do you see any similarities between what's happening now with the migrants that are coming in, that they're putting in hotels?
Oh, that's a whole different topic. We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
So let's backtrack. So that was a big part of how we ended up with Tent City. Mm-hmm. And the idea was to make it worldwide and seen. Like Ai Weiwei was there taking photographs. I changed Ai Weiwei's career.
When was that? What year was that?
This was 88, 89.
Oh, shit.
Early 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was famous. He was a famous guy already?
No, he was nobody.
Oh, nice.
He did street drawings and like that.
Wow.
And so he got involved in documenting the homeless situation. Now, I changed the history of documenting protests on the street by bringing in the consumer available handheld camera.
Yeah.
And that showed you that an individual can be a real dominant force against police brutality and other things if you can document it. And I proved that was possible. Because when I was doing it at that time, documentation was usually the camera guy, the big video pack,
Right.
the sound guy, the light guy. I had it all self-contained.
No, and I think because you went on Oprah, right? After all that happened.
Well, I went to jail for the tape and all of that stuff.
How long were you in jail for?
Well, I went on a 10-day hunger strike.
Okay.
I didn't want to. Giving up the tape was about. See, what happens when it becomes evidence? It becomes government property.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't about to give up my art for their property.
Right.
So my argument was, I'm an artist. This is my art, and it belongs to me. Now, this is the 80s. So eventually that argument worked in court. So that was the first time. See, I left the art world. So all those people about, am I an artist? Am I not an artist? I don't give a shit.
Mm-hmm.
The court determined that I'm an artist, therefore I could keep the tape. Now, the bottom line in a lot of art arguments goes to court.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a fake or is it an original? Then they bring in all the experts, you go to court. So if New York State will say that I'm a video artist, I'll accept that. Rest of those people with their shitty, what show are you in or whatever, piss off.
Right.
Not my concern. So anyway, so we established that. Now, if you watch Never Sorry and you watch my videotapes, you will see what got Ai Weiwei into trouble was using the video camera in the same way I did.
How so?
Using it as an aggressive tool, pushing your way up to the front, sticking it in the cop's face and say, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
They don't like it. They don't like it in China. They didn't like it here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in the end, I got beaten up a couple of times, knocked out, their teeth knocked out, arrested, the whole NYPD thing. And he ended up with the same thing. He got the same treatment I did.
In China.
In China. Now, the deficit for that, for me, was that I had, he was going to translate my captured into Cantonese. So if I could have put that into China, that would have been huge.
Yeah.
So then I'm flying over to Austria, because I'm part of this. I used to bring over famous tattoo artists and sideshow people in that for a show called Wild Style and Tattoo Messe.
Okay.
So I'm on my way over there, and I'm at the airport, and there's a London Financial Times. There's a big picture of Ai Weiwei. He's being arrested.
Yeah.
When he got arrested, all the police and everything came into his house. They took his computers, everything. So my DVD disappeared. It was over. So that ended that. But, so that's my style with video.
Mm-hmm.
Copied my style, got the same treatment I did. But how did he get recognized in America as a photographer? Well, hate to say it, but thanks to me. Because what happens is, he's a Chinese guy, which means he's an immigrant. He's over here in a visa. He's on 6th Avenue doing portraits, and he's trying to meet people like Allen Ginsberg, Andy Warhol, all these people.
Mm-hmm.
Not trying to meet people like me. I'm the guy who got him into trouble. So I'm going to court one day, and you can't protest in court or anything else. You can't bring any, they go through all your stuff. You can't bring in posters. You can't bring in anything. So he came to court that day. So what I did was I wrote on my hands, "Dump Koch." He was the mayor. So when I go into court, my hands are closed. You can't see anything. So when I come out of court, I flash my hands up like this, like I'm under arrest, and hold my palms up, and it says "Dump Koch." He took that picture, got it to the New York Times, and that was the first time that he got into the New York Times and into the national media.
Wow.
So that was also thanks to me.
Yeah.
So,
Does he acknowledge that, like, currently? Has he said
Well, I'd really like to do a show with him. But, yeah, I had a show at a place called Howell, and he did write a little thing that we were friends and, all of that. So, he wants to call me a friend. I'm good with that.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I would like to establish that for his history and my history.
Definitely.
Because it's parallel. And we've both been doing a lot of the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of problems with the cops for a long time. They tried to set me up in a murder, the Rakowitz murder, the monster of Tompkins Square Park, the guy that was accused of killing the homeless woman and feeding her to the homeless.
They tried to accuse you of that.
Oh, yeah, it was a whole setup. It's a long, complicated story. I can prove it. And I can lay it out at some time. I can't do it right here because I have a lot of documentation that goes with it.
Yeah.
Like they set up this show at the Palladium where they brought in Mickey the Pope. Rakowitz was supposed to work for Mickey. So they used my hat because they made Mickey the Pope a big dope hat. They used a bunch of my artwork. And there was a guy called Max Cantor who was also part of it.
Okay. Max
Cantor was Rob in Dirty Dancing. That became a cult classic. He was... He had gone to Harvard. His father, Max Cantor, he had gone to Harvard. His father was a Broadway producer. He did that show, In Comes the Clowns, da-da, da-da. You know, it's actually played in The Joker, where the Joker's beating up the people on the train.
The new Joker?
Yeah.
Shit.
And they play that song, you know, Here Comes the Clown, da-da, 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 da-da. And I wonder, because Todd Phillips, his first movie was hated. That was G.G. Allen.
All right.
Now, I'm in that because they shot the G.G. Allen over at the gas station, and Elsa and I shot that. So I'm in that for a minute.
That's amazing.
So I know that he's interested in G.G. Allen.
I have a question for you. How do you keep track of, because there's so many crossovers that happen here. How do you keep track of all of this stuff? Is it just constantly floating around like a...
Well, the good thing for me is I have a mind that puts things together like that are obscure and can put little different things, obscure things together.
You could connect the dots.
I can connect the dots with no problem. The problem is I can't get other people to understand it.
No, because you're fat. You're talking so fast. It's like tough for me to keep track of everything.
Yeah, there's a lot of details. And like I say, if you get back to the Max Cantor thing, eventually, so he's robbing Dirty Dancing, comes out of the Dakota, you know, hung out with John Lennon's kids when they were kids, all live in the same building. Harvard guy. And he wanted to be a gonzo journalist because Hunter Thompson was his big hero.
Yeah, you like Hunter Thompson?
What's that?
Do you like Hunter Thompson's work?
You know, it's interesting because it's about class and skills. You know, I've been in this game a long time, and since I come to the Lower East Side, you know, I do a thing called the New York Actor Awards, and it tries to recognize people who have made a real contribution to the avant-garde, but aren't recognized by the mainstream.
Yeah.
And that's what you were alluding to the other day when you were earlier about the working class.
Yeah.
Yes, the working class. So Max, Harvard, Dakota, John Lennon, a father famous Broadway producer, wants to be a gonzo journalist. Hunter Thompson, Columbia University, Ivy League, got beaten up by the Hells Angels, and it changed his life and made his history. Was he beaten up? Not really. Got kicked around a little bit, but he didn't have the shit kicked out of him.
Right.
Didn't break any bones. Didn't bang him up. He didn't go to the hospital. He went to the precinct.
Yeah. Do you think they recognized that he was like a college kid basically, and he wasn't like one of that?
You know, you got to remember this is the period of time when they were in, I guess, the 60s. They're all hanging out together. People are loose. It's like the Lower East Side. It's like, how did I get into a lot of these circles when, you know, I mean, it's just things are loose. It's New York City.
Right.
So it is possible to get into things like that. They're in Oakland, San Francisco. So, yeah, it's possible to hang out with people and things like that. And, you know, the Hells Angels became something. They weren't something at that time.
Yeah.
They had the potential to be that. So his book really elevated the Hells Angels to a national level.
Right.
It elevated him, elevated them. And it was really just getting knocked around by the Hells Angels. And that turned it into a legacy and a legend.
Yeah, there was a famous interview that he did, right, on like a talk show or something where they brought out
Hells Angels there.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. Very cool. Wow. So sorry, there's so much information that you're throwing at me. I'm trying to like.
Anyway, I'm just putting pieces together because if people write them down, they can follow the Rakowitz case.
Okay.
And so Max Cantor was part of that. And it's Lower East Side. So you have all these famous people. So I was wondering if Todd Phillips didn't know, obviously, about the Rakowitz case. I think he must have. The whole thing about Max Cantor and the Joker and all of that, it just seemed to me that playing that song and beating that guy up on the train was just a nod to the Lower East Side in that period of time. That's how I read it.
Do you think the person that scored the film knew that?
Well, that's Todd Phillips. I think
he knew.
Well, I mean, he was a kid at that time going to NYU.
Yeah.
And he had to hang out in the Lower East Side. And the Rakowitz murder was big.
Yeah.
You know, monster of Tompkins Square Park, feeds, you know, body to the homeless, cannibalism. Come on, that's a big story.
Huge, yeah.
Huge. And so one other note that I want to bring in here, you mentioned the Oprah thing. Yeah. So another my way of fighting back and getting out about the camera being a protective tool, a weapon. When I was at Oprah, I held it up and said, "Little brother is watching Big Brother."
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And that carries through to the day when the woman on the cell phone in Oakland, when the doors open on the train, and I think it was a she, shoots out the door, and the cop shoots the guy on the platform. Doors closed. She's got the shot.
Right.
Same idea.
Yeah.
Independent journalism. That's power.
Predicted everybody using their cell phones to record everything.
And it gives you real power.
I probably motivated at least a small contingency of people to go out and get cameras if they're experiencing things in life that, you know, are sensational in a way or that they feel are worth documenting. They probably watched that interview that you did on Oprah and went out and got cameras.
Well, I think some people, I mean, definitely a lot of people wrote about it in that. And it takes time to eventually, you know, work its way into society. But getting back to that question, was I ever threatened? So in Tompkins Square Park, there was a couple of members. This is when Tent City was there. This is like 1988, 1989, early 90s, that period of time. Hundreds of people tenting in Tompkins Square Park. It's hard to believe.
Yeah, for sure.
But the Tompkins Square Park was filled with tents and people living in them. I mean, hundreds of people.
Like LA style,
like what is now LA style.
Yeah.
And there was something in New York called Hooverville in the 30s that also, because during the Depression, all these people were living in tents in Central Park. So all of a sudden I got this bang, bang, bang on my door, and I go out there, and here's these guys, street gangs, wearing colors. Mm-hmm. Colors are like, if people look at a motorcycle gang, like an outlaw motorcycle gang, they'll see like the top rocker, it'll say, you know, name of the club or whatever, where they're from. And then it'll, you know, you'll have, I don't know, let's say Hell's Angels or whatever, right? So it's got that look. So these guys have this look, and they're like big guys. And they're like serious. And they're like Puerto Rican. And they're like, who the fuck are you? And they said, yo, bro, we got to talk. So what am I going to do? I got a table over there, got a couple of chairs, got to invite them in, got to have a sit down. So there's me and three of them, and we have a little sit down. So they tell me they have a friend, Stacy, who's telling them, Rocco, one of the crew members, that I was videotaping them and taking them to the police. And I said, okay. So, you know, then I go into my whole history and the riot and the arrests and stuff like that. And they soon realized that she was trying to set me up and was full of shit.
Why was she trying to set you up? Just
because she's an idiot.
Gotcha.
I mean, people are like that. So anyway, it flipped on her. But if it hadn't, I would have been screwed.
Yeah, but you knew how to handle the situation.
Yeah, which was lucky.
Yeah.
It was like a street thing. I was okay with handling a street thing. You know, I wish I could remember this poem. This friend of mine wrote this poem about a wolf. She had been a junkie. She was like a street prostitute, like a, you know, $5 blowjob person, but an amazing poet and incredible. I've documented some really amazing people that are off the radar. Mm-hmm. But she wrote about this poem about a friend of hers who lived with a wolf. And I got to find that poem. But every day they wake up and it's fine, except once.
And did you ever feel that way here? You never felt scared, like, you know, everything's
I was scared
fine
lots of times. Oh, lots of times.
Yeah.
Oh, being scared is, I mean, it's part of the show.
It's part of the price that you pay for being a part of the culture, though, while you're here.
Yeah, it's a fact of, you know, if I said I got no fear and I can walk around here with no fear, believe me, I'm full of shit.
Right.
I've been scared lots of times. Sometimes really scared. Mm-hmm. You know, you can get in situations down here that are like really dangerous. Even like with the police stuff. I had a lot of cops that were after me. Like I say, in the end, you know, I got knocked out, beaten up, teeth knocked out. You know, it was all part of the show. But yeah, you gotta be careful.
Oh, you know what I always wanted to ask too? So I watched a lot of old videos that you were in and stuff with the old biker gangs. Some of the symbolism that I would see, like some of the patches that they'd have like a swastika.
Okay, good point. Good point. So, Cochise talks about that.
Yeah.
Right, you got to remember these guys are Puerto Rican.
Right.
They live in the Lower East Side.
Yeah. So
they lived in Jewish houses.
Okay.
You know, the Jew thing isn't the factor. The factor is piss off.
They just wanted to upset people.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, part of the thing about being a gangster of that type is presentation. Mm-hmm. You know, that's why some people will tattoo their face.
Right.
You know, you come in with a tattooed face and some, you know, really aggressive clothing. You got a swastika on there and that. You mentally have the battle 3/4 won.
Right.
You know, I learned this lesson when I was a kid, junior high school. I got in a fight at noon, schoolyard. Won the fight, no problem. Nice. Into the principal's office, whatever.
Yeah.
So I got a detention then. So all of a sudden, school's over, and everybody's gone, and I come out, and the guy's waiting for me. Now, this time around, he got the better of me because he completely caught me off guard. I was not mentally prepared.
Right.
And it was like being sucker punched.
Yeah.
So a big part of this is your mental attitude and how you perceive the situation of where you're in. Now, the other thing you have to remember is sometimes there's a lot of fear before something happens. Then once the thing kicks in, the adrenaline and all that starts to happen.
Right.
And then the fear turns into adrenaline, and then it turns into aggression, and things change.
Great feeling.
But the fear is a fact of life. Don't let anybody bullshit you that they're not afraid. You know, that's the whole thing with Mike Tyson. Like he said, before getting in the ring, like you use this one example, he just looked over at the guy, and when he did, the guy immediately looked down. That told him he had the mental edge.
Right.
Fighting is a big part mental.
Definitely.
You know, if you think this guy's going to kick the shit out of you and he's got things that you don't have and you're weak to him and everything else, you're at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
And so fear is a fact. And yeah, there's lots of times I was afraid.
Yeah. But it's a healthy thing to have too, you know.
Well, you can't be stupid.
Yeah.
No,
You have to be street smart.
Yeah, you got to be careful, and you have to yeah, fear is part of it.
So in all of the years that you've been here, you said you've been here since 85,
79.
79?
I've been in this building since 83.
What plans do you have for this? I'm assuming that people have tried to come through and buy this place from you.
Yeah, selling the property is no problem.
Yeah.
What am I going to do about that? The hardest problem I have, like you say, I'm hard to follow, and it's true. And I've documented stuff. It's like this woman that was a $5 hooker, an amazing poet. You know, you can find, I mean, why do you think that these people like Rockefeller went to New Guinea? They didn't go over there to study Harvard.
Yeah.
They went over there because there's a truth to real primitive sort of lifestyles and people. There's a creativity there, an energy form that's, you know, can be really absorbed. What outsider art's about, a lot of these things are about. And that I found really interesting and inspiring.
And that's a greater value probably than the
For me.
monetary. Yeah.
I mean, Patti Smith doesn't need me. Why do I want to videotape Patti Smith? I don't. Nothing against Patti Smith. She's great. Or Keith Richards. You know, when I was doing the tattoo convention, I was working with people that had total access to Roseland. I easily could have gone to the Rolling Stones concert. I didn't go. It wasn't that important to me. If I took a picture of Keith Richards, if I had a picture between him taking a piss between two cars, I could probably get $10,000 for it and sell it tomorrow or today or right now.
Yeah.
But there's a million pictures of him out there.
Right.
There got to be, at least now with a digital phone, I bet you there's at least a million pictures.
Definitely.
At least 100,000 people in a stadium taking pictures of him. He doesn't need me. The people like, you know, these sort of underground people that I've documented, they need me. But that's hard to translate over to other people.
Yeah.
When you look at my front door pictures, large part of that is Puerto Rican and Dominican. It's a hard sell. Not a hard sell for me. But society does have limitations, fences, and whatever. All this bullshit they talk about, a lot of it's just untrue. But it's my goal to save that.
I feel like in the past decade or so, there's been a shift to trying to equal the playing field, so to speak, or turn the attention towards groups of people that have been forgotten in the past. Have you had more people reaching out to you in the past 10 years than before? Or?
No, not really. I mean,
that's interesting.
It is. And, you know, so that's part of my mission. Ideally, what I'd like to do is turn this place into a foundation if I can do it. You know, I'm starting to run out of gas, playing the end game. You know, I was in the hospital recently. I could have died. I had pneumonia and a sepsis and some flu. Anyway, I didn't, and I'm back. You know, my voice gets cranky once in a while, but, you know, whatever. So the idea is to try to save this and turn it into a foundation.
Gotcha.
Now, I have a couple of problems. One is nobody really knows my stuff.
I feel like my culture I'm familiar with you, you know, the graffiti world or whatnot. I feel like I've seen a ton of documentaries and everything, but it's interesting to hear you say that you feel, you know, under recognized.